Hello and welcome to this video on cider and what defines it. If you go to the section of your liquor store or similar store that sells alcoholic beverages, you will see a range of offerings in the cider section. Some are very simply fermented apple juice. These are perhaps the cheapest options available. There are also options that are made from pears and pear juice. Some have berries added. There are also varieties reinforced or fortified with extra ethanol and other flavourings. All of these are sold as cider. Fortunately, cider has some very hard definitions we can show you as examples. This is cider. This is perry. Perry is made from pear juice, so all those cider bottles with pear juice as the main ingredient are not cider. It is called perry and it is different. That lets us rule out some of what we're talking about very quickly and very easily. Is it made from pear juice? Then it's not cider. What about those other options we mentioned? Things like if they add extra ethanol, if they add berries or other flavours. Well, at least some standardization is out there. Unfortunately, the ranges in which standardization occurs can be quite sweeping. Generally speaking, the product must be made from apple juice, or at least the ferment must be. Some of them will allow for the must of apples and the addition of some pear juice. For example, one country has allowances of 25% pear juice, the remaining 75% must be apple juice. There are, of course, far less strenuous requirements, some as low as 15% apple juice. The range varies drastically by region. The range does leave us wondering, if at most 75% and as little as 15% is apple juice, what is the remainder? After all, is it just water and they've literally given you watered down apple juice? Other standard requirements are fairly common, that there's no extra ethyl alcohol added from other sources, and there's no liquor added to it. This is sometimes used to add colour or flavour, and obviously this isn't what you want if you're selling it as a juice type drink that's been fermented to make alcohol. Then there are those additions of things like berries, for instance. Weirdly enough, this is where the alcohol concentration comes in. If they're adding berries to it, some countries don't view it as a cider if it is less than 8% alcohol by volume. Others allow this, so there is a grain of salt to be taken, and you should try and get some clarification for your region. The reason for this interesting caveat is that it's often a matter of taxation. Ciders are often taxed differently to other beverages like beer or spirits. Speaking of that, cider is never distilled, but occasionally neutral spirits or grape spirits will be added. These are slightly different to the pure ethyl alcohols we've spoken about, and the added flavours. These are more often used as a preservative or to reach a certain alcohol concentration. Sometimes cider of up to 20% strength is achieved, although this is very high for cider and may lead to other issues. Some other local requirements are more reasonable and bring it down to a range between 4 and 8% alcohol by volume. That's all rather nebulous, unfortunately. The only things we can definitively say are that they don't add extra ethanol and they don't add other flavours other than apple juice or occasionally pear juice. While that is a still at least somewhat strict definition, there are some national, international, and state-based organisations that use these terms or similar to define cider. There are slightly more strict, but also lax definitions. That is based on the kind of apple used to make cider. There is actually a kind of apple specifically grown for cider. These are unsurprisingly called cider apples. These are of course not the only types required for modern cider, but there are heritage styles that must use this particular type of apple. If they're not using it, they're not actually making the heritage style. Cider is not defined by being cloudy or clear, as this is largely a marketing term with limited regulation. It's also the fact that, for most cases, consumers will not buy a bottle labelled clear when it is hazy or cloudy, nor will they buy cloudy cider when it is obviously crystal clear. It's simply not going to meet their expectations. The terms refer to the processes used to clear the cider. This can be important if you are a vegetarian or vegan. Some manufacturers use gelatin, others agar, or similar products. Gelatin is not vegan or strict vegetarian friendly. Agar is vegan and vegetarian friendly. So this is something to be aware of, even when it doesn't come down to how a cider is defined. There are a couple of styles of cider. Mostly the split is along the lines of being sweet or dry. Sweet has much more sugar as it is either added post-fermentation or the fermentation is incomplete. Dry cider often uses much lower sugar apples and these lead to higher alcohol and less sugar. As you can see, the overall terms of cider are in some places very clear cut, but in others they are too vague and nebulous. It's further complicated by the fact that each country and region has some variability in what it considers cider, the rules it has for it, and what it allows to be added or not added. Beyond defining cider as primarily an apple juice product, the remainder of the label is often just marketing. You may be able to get some indication of how it's going to taste, whether it would be a sweet or a more tart cider, and similar, by what that label says. But you may not necessarily be able to accurately call it based on that alone, if it is just marketing terminology, like organic. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.